It began on a day when the wind carried dust instead of promise. The town of Dry Creek had seen better mornings, though few could remember when. The sky hung pale and empty. Horses moved slow and tired, and in the center of the street men gathered like shadows drawn to a small, cruel spectacle. A girl stood at the edge of the wooden platform, her wrists tied with a frayed rope, her dress more dust than fabric. Her eyes lowered, though not from shame. She looked like someone who had learned too early that life was not always kind and that mercy was a thing given to others. The auctioneer's voice cracked through the still air. $3, he said. That's what she's worth, not a penny more. No one spoke. A few men shuffled their boots. Someone spat into the dirt. Another man laughed, the kind of laugh that sounds like a wound healing wrong. Then from the far end of the street a rider came slow, his coat worn thin, his hat pulled low. His horse looked as tired as he did. He tied it to a post and stood there a long moment, watching the scene like a man trying to remember if he'd been here before. His name was Eli, a rancher once, a drifter now. He'd lost his land after the drought, lost his wife after the fever, and somewhere along the line he'd lost the part of himself that still believed in anything. He didn't come looking to save anyone. He came looking for silence. But sometimes silence has a way of speaking first. He stepped closer to the crowd. The men turned. The auctioneer squinted. You buying or just looking, he asked. Eli said nothing for a while. He looked at the girl. Her hair hung over her face. Her hands trembled though she tried to hide it. He saw bruises that weren't new and fear that wasn't small. $3, he said again. That's all she's worth. Eli reached into his coat and pulled out 3 coins. They made a dull sound in his palm. He laid them on the table. I'll take her, he said. The auctioneer grinned like a man who'd just sold something worthless to someone who didn't know better. He cut the rope and waved them off. She's yours, he said. Eli nodded once. The girl didn't move. He stepped forward and spoke softly. Come on now, you're free of this place. She looked up then for the first time. Her eyes were strange, not empty, not begging, just tired in a way that seemed older than she was. They walked through town without a word. No one stopped them. No one cared. The world kept turning the way it always does when it's seen too much. Outside town he found his horse. He lifted her up gently. She flinched but didn't fight. They rode west until the sun began to fall. He stopped near a creek that still held a little water and made a small fire. She sat across from him, silent as stone. You got a name? He asked. She hesitated. Anna, she said finally, though it sounded like she hadn't used it in a long time. He nodded. I'm Eli. She didn't answer, just watched the fire. They ate what little he had. Dried meat, a bit of bread. When night came she slept curled on the ground like someone afraid of taking too much space. Eli sat awake a long time, listening to the wind, watching the stars move slow across the dark. He told himself he'd drop her at the next town. Maybe find someone kind enough to take her in. That was all. No more, but he knew already it wouldn't be that simple. There was something in the way she carried silence. Like she knew things that weren't meant to be spoken. Like she carried the echo of something that used to be his. The next morning they rode again. She didn't ask where they were going and he didn't say. The land stretched wide and lonely. Hills that looked like old bones, the sun hard and unkind. At midday they came across an old church, half fallen to dust. He stopped to rest. She wandered inside. The air was cool. Light slipped through broken glass in thin colors. He followed her and found her kneeling by what was left of the altar. Her lips moved though no sound came out. You praying? He asked. She looked up, just remembering, she said. He waited, but she said nothing more. That night they camped again near the hills. The fire burned low. She asked him where he was from. He said a place that doesn't matter anymore. She nodded like she understood. Maybe she did. He asked her how she ended up on that platform. Her voice shook a little. My family owed money, she said. They said selling me was easier than paying. Eli stared at the fire. His jaw tightened. The world had a way of chewing up the weak. Always had. He told her to sleep. She did. But he didn't. He sat there staring at the coins in his hand. 3 small pieces of metal. That was the price of a life. He'd seen cattle worth more. As dawn broke he thought about leaving her at the next town again. He thought about it hard, but when she woke and looked at him with those tired eyes he couldn't say the words, so they kept going. Days passed. They spoke little, but something in the quiet began to change. She started to hum sometimes when the wind was soft. He found himself listening. Once she laughed at a wild horse running in the distance. It was a small sound, but it stayed with him all day. He started fixing things, little things, the saddle strap, the torn edge of her dress, as if mending what was broken around him might help mend what was broken inside. But the past has a way of following a man, and his was riding closer than he knew. On the 7th day they reached the edge of the valley. A small town rested below. He said they'd find work there, maybe stay a while. She looked uneasy. What if they find me? She whispered. Who? He asked. The men who sold me. He looked at her long, then said, no one's taking you again. That night he meant it. He didn't know why, but he did. The firelight flickered across her face. She was still too thin to pale, but there was something else now. A little strength, a little light. He looked at her and felt something stir. Not love. Not yet. Something older. something like purpose. He turned his gaze to the stars and whispered to himself, maybe $3 wasn't the price I paid. Maybe it was the price I was given to start again. And far out in the dark where the land met the sky, something shifted. The kind of shift a man doesn't see until it's too late to turn back. The story of Eli and the girl named Anna had just begun. The days that followed felt quieter, though the quiet was not peace. It was the kind that waits before a storm. Eli tried to tell himself he had done enough. He bought the girl her freedom, he gave her food and shelter. But at night, when the wind rose through the grass, he could not shake the feeling that he owed something more. They stayed near the town at the edge of the valley, a place called Willow Bend. It was small and gray and half forgotten, the kind of place where people knew enough to mind their own business. He found work fixing fences for a rancher who didn't ask questions. Anna helped at the small tavern in town, washing dishes, sweeping floors, earning her own coin. Eli thought maybe this was what quiet redemption looked like. Two broken souls piecing together what life had taken. But peace built on secrets is thin as glass. And glass always cracks when the wind turns. One evening he found her sitting by the river that cut through the valley. The sun had gone down, but the sky still held a faint gold. She was holding a small piece of folded paper. Her hands shook as she read it. "What's that?" he asked. She startled a little, then hid the paper behind her back. "Just something from before," she said. He didn't push, not yet. The next day she was distant. Her eyes followed the horizon too much. Her voice was smaller. That night she didn't eat. Eli waited till she slept. Then he found the paper near her pack. He shouldn't have looked, but he did. It was a letter, old and torn, written in a rough hand. It spoke of a man who once worked for a rancher named Eli, a man who'd stolen money, a man who'd vanished after a fire, and it ended with one line: "If you find the girl, tell her the man she seeks lives still." Eli felt the breath leave his chest. The world seemed to tilt. He folded the paper slow. His hands trembled. He stared at the fire and saw it again. That night, years ago, his house, his wife, the blaze. The man he'd trusted who disappeared with everything he owned. The man who'd left him with nothing but ashes and guilt. He looked at the sleeping girl and felt the ground shift under him. Morning came hard. The light felt colder. Anna smiled when she woke, but her eyes held a storm. Eli asked her where she got the letter. "A man gave it to me once," she said, "before they sold me. He said it belonged to someone who took everything from him." He felt his throat tighten. "Who was that man?" he asked. She hesitated, then said, "My father." Eli turned away. The world spun. He felt every sin he'd ever buried rise up to breathe again. "Your father's name?" he asked softly. "Jacob," she said. "Jacob Haynes." Eli closed his eyes. He had not spoken that name in years. It came back to him with the taste of smoke and loss. He remembered that night, the shouting, the fire, the shadows, and the man running through the dark with his horse and his gold. Eli had chased him once, but the river took him, or so he thought. Now the man's daughter sat across from him, saved by his hand, freed by his coin, and she carried the letter that told the truth of it all. Eli rose and walked a long while before he spoke again. "You said your father was taken by the river?" he asked. She nodded. "That's what they told me." He said nothing more. For 3 days he could not sleep. He fixed fences till his hands bled. He rode far into the hills, but the truth followed like a shadow that would not tire. He had spent his life running from the fire. Now it had found him again in the shape of a girl who called herself Anna. One evening she found him sitting by the barn staring at nothing. "You're hiding something," she said. He looked up, his eyes hollow. He wanted to tell her the truth, that her father had been the man who ruined him, that he'd lost everything because of him, that maybe saving her was not kindness but penance. But when he saw her face he couldn't speak the words. She said, "I know you're not a cruel man. I see how you look when you think no one's watching. Like you've lost something you can't name." He swallowed hard. "Maybe I have," he said. She nodded. "Me too." They sat there a long time as the crickets began to sing. The days stretched on. The work continued. But something heavy grew between them, a truth that wanted out. Then one morning riders came from the east, men in dust coats with cold eyes. They rode into town asking about a girl named Anna Haynes. Word spread quick. Eli heard before the sun set. He found her by the creek again. She looked at him with that same quiet fear he'd seen the first day. "They found me," she said. He said, "I won't let them take you. They'll kill you," she whispered. He smiled faintly. "Maybe so, but not today." That night they packed what little they owned, the horse, the small food sack, the worn blanket. Before dawn they left Willow Bend. The town still slept. Only the wind saw them go. They rode north. The land grew rough. Hills turned to stone. The air thin and sharp. By the third day they reached a canyon where the road split in two. He stopped there, looked at her. "Anna," he said, "there's something I should have told you." Her eyes searched his face. "Your father," he said slowly. "I knew him." She stiffened. "How he took from me once years ago. Everything I had. I thought he was dead. But that letter of yours said he lived." She stared at him, then whispered, "You hate him." Eli shook his head. "I did, but I think I hate myself more." For what she asked. For never forgiving him. For letting that night turn me into the man I became. Tears filled her eyes. He reached out but didn't touch her. He said, I didn't know you were his blood. If I had, I don't know what I'd have done. She looked at him for a long time, then said softly, maybe it's better you didn't. The silence after that was heavy and full. She turned away and walked toward the river below. The wind pulled at her hair. Eli watched her go and felt the past close in like dust. He thought saving her would save him, but now he saw it clear. Redemption doesn't come easy. It comes slow, and it comes through pain. He watched her kneel by the water and saw her reflection beside his two broken souls. One carrying guilt, one carrying grief, both searching for something they could not name. He said her name once, the sound barely more than a breath. She turned, her eyes soft now. Maybe this is how we both start again, she said. He wanted to believe her. The sun sank behind the canyon walls. The last light fell on them both. And somewhere far off a horse whinnied. The riders had found their trail. Eli rose slow, the weight of every year pressing down. The story was not done yet, not for him, not for her. They heard the hooves before they saw the dust. A low thunder that rolled across the canyon floor like a promise. Eli turned his face toward the sound. The air felt heavy, the kind that holds its breath before something breaks. Anna stood behind him, clutching the pack to her chest. Her eyes were wide but dry. She had seen enough in her life to know when running no longer mattered. Eli said softly, stay behind me. She nodded. The riders came into view. 4 of them, faces hard, eyes sharp as steel. Their coats moved with the wind and their horses breathed smoke into the dawn light. The man in front wore a black hat. His face was lean and pale, like he hadn't smiled in years. He raised a hand and the others stopped. He looked at Eli and said, you've got something that belongs to us. Eli said nothing. The man's eyes drifted to Anna. The corner of his mouth curled just enough to show he knew. She's property, he said. Bought and sold fair. Eli's voice was calm. Not anymore. The man laughed. You think you can buy redemption with $3 and a lie? Eli said, I ain't looking for redemption. Just trying to live with what's left of me. The man's smile faded. He nodded to his men. Eli felt the old weight of the gun at his hip. He hadn't drawn it in years. His hand hovered near it now. He said, you'll turn that horse around. You'll forget this trail. The man in black shook his head. No, sir. We come to collect. The wind shifted. The canyon seemed to hold its breath. Then everything moved at once. Eli drew first. The sound cracked like thunder. A horse screamed. Dust flew. The men fired back. The echoes rolled through the stone. Anna dropped to the ground, her hands over her head. When the smoke cleared, 2 riders lay still. The 3rd turned and fled. The man in black sat bleeding in the saddle. He looked at Eli and spat blood. You don't even know who she is, he said. Eli said, maybe not. But I know who I was. And I ain't that man no more. The man coughed once, then fell from his horse. The dust swallowed him whole. The sound of the river came back slow. The world seemed to breathe again. Eli holstered the gun. His hands shook. He looked at Anna. You hurt, he asked. She shook her head. Her eyes were wet now. He walked to the edge of the canyon. The morning sun touched the rocks in a soft pale gold. He said quietly, I thought killing made me something once. Then I thought saving you might make me something else. But I reckon a man can't build his soul on what he's done, only on what he keeps doing. Anna came to stand beside him. She said, I remember my father. Not much, just his hands. He used to build little wooden horses for me. Said one day he'd take me where the land met the sea. Eli nodded, his throat tight. He said I took that from him. She looked at him. No, the world took it. You're just trying to give back what's left. He wanted to believe her. They buried the bodies before sunset. No words, just the sound of shovels and wind. That night they made camp beneath the stars. The fire burned small but steady. Anna sat close to it, her face soft in the light. She said, when I was taken they said I was worthless, old for less than a meal, but I think worth ain't what people say. It's what you decide to keep alive. Eli listened. The words felt heavier than the night around them. He said, I once had a son. He'd be your age now if he'd lived. She looked up. What happened? He stared into the flames, the fire, the night of it, the smell of smoke. He said, I couldn't save him. She said softly, maybe saving me was saving him too. He looked at her then, really looked, the same quiet strength, the same steady eyes. Something in his chest broke open. The fire cracked, the stars burned cold. He said, when this is done you go west. Find that sea your father spoke of. Tone stop till you see it, she said. And you? He smiled, a tired smile. I'll ride till I can't. Maybe find a place quiet enough to forget my own name. She said, maybe I'll find it for you. He chuckled once. Maybe you will. The night went still after that. No sound but the wind moving through the rocks. In the morning they packed again. The world felt new but heavy. They rode west. The sky stretched wide above them, the kind of wide that makes a man feel small and forgiven all at once. Days passed, towns blurred by. The land softened. They found a trail that led through the pines. Eli grew weaker. The wound from the fight had started to turn. He said nothing, but she saw the color leave his face. By the 6th night he couldn't ride. They stopped near a quiet stream. She made a fire and sat by him. His breath came slow. He said, you keep going when I can't. She shook her head. I'm not leaving you. He smiled faint. You already did the hard part. You made me remember what it feels like to be human again. Tears filled her eyes. Don't say that. He took her hand, his voice soft. Listen, the past don't own you. Don't let my mistakes be your chain. She pressed his hand to her chest. Her voice broke. You weren't my mistake. He looked at her. The firelight flickered in his eyes. He said, when I first saw you, I thought you were a ghost come to haunt me. Now I think maybe you were an angel sent to show me what grace looks like. She couldn't speak. He closed his eyes. The breath left him slow. The fire burned low. The night stretched long. She sat there till the dawn came. When the first light touched his face, she whispered a prayer she didn't know she remembered. Then she took the small wooden cross from around her neck and laid it in his hand. She buried him by the stream. The earth was soft and clean. Then she turned west. She walked till her feet bled, rode till the horse gave out. Weeks later, she reached the sea. It was larger than she had dreamed, endless and alive. The wind smelled like salt and freedom. She stood there a long time, then whispered his name into the waves, Eli. The sea took it and carried it somewhere she couldn't see. And somewhere beyond the horizon a man found peace in the sound of the tide. The sun rose pale and slow over the sea that morning. Anna stood where the land met the water and watched the light stretch across the waves. The wind tugged at her hair. Her dress clung to her legs, heavy with dust and salt. She felt small in that moment and endless too. The sea whispered things she could not name, stories older than her grief, voices that seemed to say he was home now. She closed her eyes and breathed deep. Behind her the land waited, quiet, still, empty of him yet full of what he left behind. She built a small fire on the beach that night. The driftwood cracked and sparked in the flame through shadows that danced across the sand. She took out the small wooden horse she had carried since she was a child, the only thing she had kept through the years of pain and silence. She set it beside the fire. Her father had carved it once upon a time before the world turned hard. He had said it would bring her luck. She looked at it now and thought maybe luck wasn't what it gave her. Maybe it was memory. Maybe it was proof that kindness once existed in the world and could again. She spoke softly to the fire as if it could hear her. I found him. I found the man who carried your guilt. And he found peace. I think that's what you would have wanted. The wind shifted. The flame bent low. The seaside. She sat there until the stars climbed high. Somewhere out there she imagined Eli's spirit riding beneath the same sky. Free at last. Days passed. She stayed near the coast working for food and shelter. She learned to fish. She learned to mend nets. The villagers spoke little, but their eyes were kind. She kept to herself. Sometimes she would wake in the night and see his face in her dreams. Not the tired face from that last night by the stream, but the one he might have had long before the wars and the sorrow. A face at peace, a man forgiven. One morning, an old woman from the village came to her door. She said, "You have a calm spirit. Would you read letters for me? My eyes have grown too dim." Anna smiled. "I can try." The woman brought a small bundle of worn envelopes tied with a ribbon. She said, "My son writes from the frontier. I cannot see his words anymore, but I still want to hear them." Anna untied the ribbon. Her hands trembled a little as she opened the first letter. The ink was faded, but the words were steady. He wrote of the wide plains, of dust and danger, of men trying to make something honest out of the wild. She read aloud, her voice slow and clear. When she finished, the old woman smiled, said, "Thank you, child. You read like you knew him." Anna said, "Maybe I do." The next day another woman came. Then another. Soon she was reading letters for the whole village. Letters from sons and husbands and fathers lost to distance or war. Each word she read felt like a heartbeat returned. And with each letter she spoke aloud, something began to heal inside her. One night, after reading for a young mother whose husband had gone missing, Anna sat by the shore again. She looked up at the stars and whispered, "You were right, Eli. The past don't own us, but it shapes the way we hold the light." The waves broke soft around her feet. As months turned into years, she became known as the letter keeper, the woman who gave voices to the lost. Travelers would come from far towns to find her. They would bring letters that had never been read or words they could not bear to speak. She never asked for payment. She only asked them to tell her one thing about the person who wrote it. She said the truth lives in the sound of a name spoken with love. They said she had a stillness about her, like she had seen too much sorrow to fear it anymore. Sometimes children would gather by her fire. She would tell them stories of the old trails, of men who had forgotten what mercy looked like until it came riding in quiet. They would ask her how she knew such tales. She would smile and say, "The wind remembers everything." One night when the sky was clear, she felt a pull deep in her chest. A soft ache, like something calling her back to the land she had left behind. She knew then that she had one more journey to make. So she packed her things, took the small wooden horse, left the sea behind. She walked inland for many days. The air grew dry again, the ground rough and red. At the edge of a canyon she found a place where the river curved around the rocks. The same place where she had buried him. The cross she had left in his hand was still there, though weathered and gray. She knelt beside it. Her voice trembled. "I did as you asked. I saw the sea. I lived for both of us." The wind moved through the grass like an answer. She took the wooden horse from her pack and placed it beside the cross. She said, "You were never a ghost, Eli. You were the last piece of my father's kindness come back to find me. The sun dipped low behind the hills. The light turned gold, then deep red. She stayed there until the stars began to show. Then she whispered thank you for seeing me when no one else did. The night held her words and carried them across the canyon. She stood and turned to go, but something in the air felt different. A shadow moved near the rocks, a rider. Her heart stopped for a moment. The rider came closer. It was a young man. His face looked familiar in a way she could not name. He said, "Are you the woman who reads letters?" She nodded. He handed her a small envelope. Said this was given to me by a traveler. Said it was meant for someone by the sea, but no name was written. She opened it slowly. The handwriting made her breath catch. It was The letter read simply, "If you find her, tell her the light she carries is mine too. Tell her I found peace where her forgiveness lives." Tears blurred her vision. She looked up. The rider said, "I can take you to the sea again if you wish." She smiled faintly. "No, the sea's already here." The man watched her a moment, then nodded and rowed away. She stayed by the river till dawn. The light broke over the rocks, and the water shone like glass. She whispered his name one last time, "Eli." The sound vanished into the morning air. Then she turned and walked toward the rising sun. The years faded slow, like footprints washed from dry ground after rain. Seasons turned over each other until time itself felt soft and hollow. The land changed, yet somehow stayed the same. In the quiet places where wind carried old voices, there was still talk of the woman who read the letters. Some said she lived to be very old and her hair turned silver like moonlight on still water. Others said she vanished one evening near the river where the man had been buried. Only her lantern was found still burning, though no wind could reach it. But those who believed in gentler things said she never vanished. They said the river took her home. There was a traveler once, a man with sunburned skin and eyes, tired from years of wandering. He stopped at that same canyon near sundown. He found the wooden horse resting beside the worn cross. He picked it up and turned it over in his hand. On the bottom were carved two letters, A and E. He stood there for a long time, staring at the letters as the last light bled across the sky. Then he set the carving back in its place and whispered, "May they both rest easy now." When he rode away, he thought he saw something move near the edge of the river. Two shapes walking side by side. A tall man and a young woman. The light was faint, but they seemed to glow from within. He blinked and they were gone. Only the rippling water remained. They say the land remembers those who loved it truly. The soil keeps their stories like seeds waiting to bloom again. The whisper of the grass, the shape of the hills, the shimmer of the air at dusk, all of it carries the breath of what came before. In a small town far from that river, a little girl grew up hearing tales of the woman who spoke the words of the lost. She had hair the color of wheat and eyes the color of rain. Her mother said she was born the night a strange calm settled over the valley. When the girl was older, she liked to sit by the window during storms and listen. She said the thunder sounded like hooves running. She said the wind spoke names she did not know but somehow recognized. Her mother once asked, "What do you hear, child?" The girl smiled faintly. "A man and a woman. They sound happy." And then she would laugh soft and quiet as if the sound itself belonged to another time. The old folk said maybe souls do not die the way we think. Maybe they pass through the dust and return when the land is ready to remember them. The girl grew up kind and strong. She could mend what was broken. She could calm frightened horses with a single touch. Some said she was blessed. Some said she carried an old light in her. And maybe she did, because one evening she walked down to the river that ran behind her home. The same river that had once run through that canyon, though she did not know its story. The air was golden. The world was still. She bent to pick something from the water. It was smooth and small, a wooden horse, worn by time but still whole. She traced her fingers over the carved letters, A and E. She felt a warmth spread through her chest. Not fear, not confusion. Just a sense that something in the world had come full circle. She placed the carving in her pocket and turned toward home. The sky burned with a kind of light that makes the heart ache. That strange mix of sorrow and peace that only the dying day can hold. The land breathed. The river shimmered. Somewhere far off, a voice whispered her name. And though she could not know why, tears came to her eyes. Maybe because every soul somehow knows the sound of love finding its way back through time. The story of Eli and Anna became legend long after their names were forgotten. Not because of what they lost, but because of what they gave back to the world. They had shown that even in the cruelest places where life is bought and sold, the smallest act of grace can change the shape of everything. A coin dropped in mercy. A coin dropped in mercy. That is how redemption begins. And though their graves are gone and their words have faded into dust, the light they carried still moves through the air like the faint hum of a forgotten hymn. When the wind sweeps over the plains, some say you can still hear it. The soft sound of two souls speaking without words. One saying forgive me, the other saying I already have. And then silence. The kind that means peace. The kind that feels like home. The world turns on. Towns rise and fall. Trails vanish beneath new roads. But somewhere out there in the quiet edge of the frontier where the sky meets forever, their story lingers. Because stories like theirs never truly end. They just keep breathing in the hearts that need them. The ones who wander. The ones who wait. the ones who believe that even broken souls can find each other again in the dust. So when you stand alone at dusk and the wind touches your face, remember this: every kindness echoes, every grace leaves a trace, and somewhere two old souls are still walking that endless horizon together. He bought her for $3. The world called her worthless, but in the end she was worth everything.